Here at Singularity University, I'm talking to Wegner, a very German name, but he's very English, and he's talking about 3D printing, and he is very excited. Now, everybody's always excited about 3D printing, but I'm going to challenge him to come up with something practical. Andre, 34% of the 3D printing objects are now used in production?
Yeah, that's right. It's really exciting. We're seeing production components like fuel injection nozzles, hip replacement cups, hearing aids, dental crowns. These are actual parts that are used in everyday production. So the technology that used to be used for prototyping only is now actually becoming something that we're putting into everyday objects. Very exciting.
And but I mean, we have all these $1,000 printed or $2,000 3D printers who make extremely terrible plastic objects who irritate the hell out of me. You're saying that 34% of what's printed is actually used for something useful?
Absolutely, and they might not come from the printers that you see every day. They come from metal printers, maybe.
$50,000 or $100,000 or $200,000 printers.
They are still $500,000, but we see those price points receding the same way those plastic printers used to be $20,000, $50,000 just 5 or 7 years ago, and now we're seeing those price points come down. We're going to see the same trend happening on the higher end side.
So these low-end printers are basically not, they're used for having fun or doing prototyping.
Well, they play a very important part because what they do is allow children and people that don't typically have access to creation tools like that to get into the technology to start off with. So they're an entry drug, let's say.
So what kind of layers of printers there are? There's under 2,000, under 3,000. They can be used for prototyping and for playing around. And then when does it become serious?
Well, it becomes serious. There's 7 different base technologies for 3D printing, and they're all good for different types of technologies that you're building. But one that is very well known now is the laser sintering, which is using lasers on the powder bed printers to actually make objects in nearly any material that you can think about. There's more than 300 materials that you can now print. So those are some of the
They are how much?
They're $500,000, $750,000, something like that.
They can print and they can make products, very useful, but they are extremely expensive per hour. So these parts have to be also for dentist, if you have a $1,000 dentist tooth kind of thing.
They're for industry or for dentists. Right now, they're being used at the high end. But as I said earlier, those prices are quickly coming down. And it's not only the prices that are a problem, it's also the usability and the speed and the material cost.
The modeling software.
In the modeling software, there are many challenges that we have to address. But the opportunity is that we're going to disrupt supply chains in such a big way. Right? And then
you had a beautiful picture that, we're going to manufacturing, to manufacturing on the spot. But in 10 years, 2024, what will the role of 3D printing be?
What we expect to happen is by 2027, 10% of manufacturing will be made digitally closer to the point of use. That's $1.7 trillion worth of value, changing the way it's produced today to the way it's produced in, 13 years, but it's going to change more.
10 years is fine. So in 10% of production is going to be individual produced by printers, by 3D printers.
Not necessarily 3D printers, digital manufacturing closer to the point of use. This includes CNC or laser cutting or injection molding, but not in a central location anymore. We're taking it out of the central context and using these massive supply chains to get objects to places. We're putting it closer to the point of use. It's very exciting technology.
And will it have influence on the price to produce it or more the flexibility?
It will start for the objects that are not price sensitive, objects that have a end-of-life components, the spare parts that you can't find for your car, or the spare parts for the oil rig that costs $2 million if it ever goes down, right?
Planes which break down everywhere all over the world.
Exactly. So you're going to start with those parts, but quickly it will move towards a common middle ground. It will never be able to produce everything. Plastic cups are still going to be made in China on like 100 million objects at a time, right? But for certain objects, for object ranges, especially those under 10,000 units, this is a clear alternative.
You say there's 2 groups of people in the 3D printing world. The one who basically are all about freedom of design, and you are about freedom of manufacturing. And you're in the last camp. You're not interested in the design world. So how do you see it developing there?
I'm quite excited about what design freedom means, but I just think that 99% of people want what their neighbor has, right? The truth is, the maker market, the 3D printers, the cheap 3D printers that are already being sold now, the companies selling them maxed out on the maker market very early on. So MakerBot, one of the best known brands, now sells 70% of its market. 70% of its market is a professional industry. So it's not a maker community anymore. We might imagine that more people want customization and more people have the time for it. But the truth is, they just want the products that they can get cheap.
Good old, basically making beautiful letters and how do you call that, desktop publishing. That's not for everybody. That's for a very few people, and same with 3D printing.
The reality is that Chris Anderson was right. The more tools are at people's disposal, the more long tail exists, the more people will use it. And there's no question about it. But you're going from a base that was 0.1%, you're going to maybe 5%. You're never going to 100%. So the truth is, for that 95% that is still in the old paradigm, they want the products the same way they were. They don't necessarily want the innovation.
The real value is in good old manufacturing, how that's going to be changed, more flexible and more able to faster and better help us to get what we want.
We spent 16% of our GDP in America moving things from A to B and storing it at B, right? If that's not a market to be disrupted, I don't know what is.
Andre, what do you have on you which is 3D printed?
Well, nothing right now. Actually.
Mr. 3D printing, and he has absolutely nothing on him. Okay, in 5 years?
I hope not, but I might have a hip replacement cup. You know, I'm certainly
your teeth, basically,
or my earphones, or my glasses, and there's many things that are 3D printable these days.
Hey, we're rethinking educational goals in this country. So in 2023. Everybody needs to do 3D printing at school and learn how to make this and programming and that kind of stuff. But in order to make space for that, we need to remove a lot of things from the curriculum. Can we remove involuntarily learning of German, French, Latin, grammar, spelling, lots of different math nonsense? What can we get out of the curriculum so we make room for the new 21st century skills?
Well, actually, I'd like to talk, I think maybe more interestingly is how are we going to change the structure? Right? Because what we're saying is people are going to change their jobs every 3 months, every 3 years, every 6 years, and we need to retrain them in that capacity all the time. So why are we putting all this front-end learning and thinking that it's okay to have this front-end learning? What I think is much more interesting is let our kids decide themselves what they want to learn, and the only way they're going to do that is very early on get exposure, get experience in the industries that they need to work in. So I'm saying we can compartmentalize education, maybe some base education, but maybe we stop with that when they're 10 years old and stop schooling when they're 10 and start moving to a more compartmentalized, okay, you want to go into 3D printing, then these are the things that are more interesting for you.
Okay, so people need to start following their interest.
Exactly, and give them the opportunity to do that instead of having a standardized core curriculum very early on.
Learn how to learn.
Yes, exactly. In this new environment where people have to adapt to new changes, new technologies very quickly, right? We need to give them the opportunity to learn how to adapt rather than to learn base information.
Thank you, Andre.